Hi everyone, my name is Jane, and this is the second part of the video exploring my process on a project I did on Tekken 7. In the first video I talk about how I started this project, where the inspiration came from, and I talk about my process of making the very first version and sharing that with the community online with the Tekken subreddit. In this video I'm going to explore version 2 and version 3 and talk about how I got there and what it looks like in the end result. So I had to start from square one, go back to the basics, and I decided to try and understand what was I trying to do, what was the problem I was trying to solve. And you know, I made a lot of assumptions, which is you have to make assumptions when you try to create something, anything you make. But I made too many of them, and I needed some concrete evidence to support what I was trying to make. I needed a good foundation, and so I went to Reddit again, and I went on the mega thread for beginners. So there's a beginner mega thread on the Tekken Reddit community, and there is, generally a lot of beginners would comment things, questions, and a lot of people would pipe in and just post their responses and help them out. And what I did was I went through it, I was reading through it, and I said, okay, this is interesting, this is probably going to be useful. So I incorporated a rigorous process where I use sticky notes. So I use these sticky notes to record all the comments. So I went to the most recent 15 or so comments, and I put every single question on a sticky note, and I didn't skip a question. Sometimes I wanted to skip a question. I thought, oh, this seems too basic. Like, why would I include this as a thing to discover some, probe some insights on what I could do here? But I chose to not skip anything. So I had about 15 or so, and I had this is most of it, not all of it, but this is most of all the stickies I used to record all the comments. I put all these stickies into categories, and so I've clumped the ones that are similar to each other, and I've arranged them in this particular way, and I've labeled certain buckets that define what they share in common. So you see these columns, and each column is a specific category. In general, when I finish organizing all the comments on my post-its and I organize them and try to understand what I was learning, I figured out that in general you can see that some of the comments were very, very vague and arranged to being very, very specific. If they were very vague, people just needed some general directions on how to start. For example, they might need some help in picking what kind of character they should play and specialize in. The next level on being more specific is people then had questions about how to play the game in general. So sometimes their comments are coming up where people were saying, I don't know how to deal with getting rushed down. Some people have been playing for a long time but don't really know how to address certain situations or how to respond. And there are also questions where people asked about navigating Tekken, the user interface, how to set sort of things up in terms of mechanics. So this category is more interesting. So at this point, this is when players have defined a character that they want to specialize in. So when players decide what kind of character they want to play, there's generally two types of questions they tend to ask. The first type are how to play a character effectively, high-level fundamentals, looking at strategy and tactics. And then the second part is a very technical aspect of button input. So sometimes, especially when you're learning how to play a character, the way you put the buttons and the speed you tap them really does matter in terms of getting a certain move to happen. So for example, some people can't figure out how to consistently input certain buttons, how to consistently execute these kind of moves for this character. So generally, when it comes to character specific, there's two types of questions that come up. In terms of how I would like to move forward with the project, I was thinking of either going in this direction or in this direction. So looking at high-level fundamentals, that can help you apply to many broad situations. But I was also interested in looking at something that's character specific. I didn't want it to be applicable to all characters. So there's lots of, for example, YouTube videos out there. There aren't character specific. They're meant to just talk about high-level fundamentals. And decided to combine character specific tactics with high-level fundamentals. So I wanted to explore high-level fundamentals by looking at a specific character. One feedback that I got from the first version was that for beginners, it's usually a lot more helpful if you if you help them develop a game plan with the set moves to play. So it's more helpful in that aspect. So I thought, okay, maybe I can do something like this, because I was initially, when I was doing this project, I was like, oh, I'll target beginners, intermediate players, and that wasn't really a good enough target audience because it's not specific enough. It's too broad and too general. It's much more helpful to be more specific. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to target, beginners, probably people who are looking to pick up a character, looking to learn more, have more depth understanding of this game. And I found a really great video that talks about game plan and tactics, game plan and specific moves for Josie, and I pretty much ripped those moves from that video. But what was really helpful was how they categorized these moves. Initially, when I made version 1, I just had these moves, and that was it. There wasn't anything that was meaning attached to it. But this video actually added a lot of meaning to different moves, and I think that's what's powerful about that, is creating meaning, right? It's okay, so here's this down forward 2, but what does it mean? And if you just say, oh, it's good for certain punishment, it's a ranged attack, it's good for doing these certain things, it's good response to certain moves, then there's meaning and you understand how to apply it. And so I was very interested in that aspect. I thought that was really, really useful. So I did a second take of this, and I decided to make cards. So I had one card represent one move, and I decided to use cards because I think it's an interesting way of compartmentalizing information and knowledge, and helps us create comparisons. And I think that's the most fundamental aspect of data visualization, is to enable comparison. The question we should always ask yourself is compared to what, right? And a bar chart has no meaning if it's just a single bar. It only has meaning if there's 2 and more. And that's when you can see things like trends, right? You can understand if it's going up or down, maybe there's no change, and you start to ask yourself why, and then that's where you can get insights. That's when you can learn something new. And I decided to make each move as a card because I thought it would be interesting if you could move these cards around and compare different moves and understand why certain moves are good for certain situations. And that was the idea behind this. I started making cards that were like a quarter size of an A4 sheet of paper. And I reorganized everything, right? So I got a lot of feedback. There's a couple, I'm trying to remember them all, but one of them was, don't focus too much on startup frame. Here it was, it's like centers, too much in the center. It doesn't really matter to people that much. It took up a lot of space, so I was like, okay, maybe put that to the side. That was the first one. Second one was, there's really no meaning to these kind of moves. It's just there. It's pretty much copy and paste from the table. Another one was, people said it was really hard to compare things. So if you want to compare this to this, it's too far to make a quick comparison. And another thing was damage. So damage was, they said, I'm not going to count if there's 22 spikes here. I was like, okay, that's a good point. They liked showing the range. That was useful, mainly because this data doesn't exist in tables. I had to manually collect it. Maybe that's why it was useful. I'm not sure if it's useful to visualize it. They said this was confusing as heck. I think that's true. I mean, it doesn't have the labels here. I put in the legend, but that's usually not sufficient. If you had to make people go back and forth, it's not sufficient. I was also told that names of moves aren't also very commonly used. People don't really remember them. They usually just remember the command. So they just say down forward +4, down forward 4, right? Down forward 2, down 4. So I thought, okay, maybe I can eliminate this and just keep this. So I made a couple of decisions to get rid of things and reorganize things. Another thing was, there's a lot of things to count here. So 15, are you really going to count 15 boxes? They said, if it's easier to just read the number, what's the point of visualizing it? Valid point. So I did a couple of changes to address all those things I just mentioned. Let's see. Okay, the first thing, let's go through this little by little. So the first was, here's the frame data, startup frame. So I decided to chunk them into 5s. So you can just go 5, 10, 15, right? It's just easier to count. I think that's pretty important. And in terms of damage, I think what I did was I started bucketing them. So instead of saying there's 10 spikes for damage 10, there will be 3 levels of damages. So it would be low damage, medium damage, high damage. Medium is damage of 10 or below. That's low, sorry, low damage is 10 and below. Medium is 10 to 15, and 16 plus is high damage. So they'll have associated shape with associated shape. Man, I don't remember what everything I did. Okay, so here's effective range. Here is just a move input, button input. Doesn't have the name anymore, right? I removed that completely. And here it was from that video I mentioned, right? So here it shows the how do you label this move. So you can say that this move is good for punish standing, it's good for punish whiff or at range. And here we have remember the follow-up frames, right? There's 3 different things that can happen: hit, block, counter hit. So I put it in a bar chart. I was just like, you know what, there's no point. I'm just gonna put it in a bar chart so it's easy to compare. I'm not gonna overcomplicate this because it's one of those things that's more minute that's important to compare across the 3 things. If you didn't have to compare, I wouldn't probably do it this way. So this was like a very early version 2, and then I was testing out different approaches here, different sizes. So this is where it was a bit more formal. So I think this is all of the moves I decided to do. Oh no, it's not, sorry. This is where it got more formal. Okay, and then let's do the next version. Yeah, I saved a couple files to keep track of things. Okay, so here's when it looks better. So I had the startup frame here. I had the block hit, counter hit, damage. And you can see, so I did this because it looks so this is for low damage, medium damage, and this one is high damage. Granted, the problem with this would still look too similar, so I did make changes later on, but I'm not going to get into that until I talk about the final version. In Illustrator, you can create charts to determine size. So I had like a table from Excel, and then I just, copy and paste the information here. And so these are actually to scale, right? This is a 9, this is a 13. So I added these labels. Remember the previous version, there were no labels. It was just, here are 3 things, but now there's labels. You don't have to go back and forth to the legend and reference it. Let's see, anything else that was different? I think that was it. I addressed all the concerns. Oh yeah, so I didn't put this, so I didn't put the start frame in the middle, it's more to the side. Everything's still very similar in this aspect. Okay, so this is version 2. At this point, version 2 is done, and I was still a little bit traumatized from version 1 because I didn't want to navigate a lot of feedback and have to filter through that. So I thought, maybe I should just send it to one person. So there's one person who's been consistently giving me feedback, and I've been active in asking them for feedback. And I decided to send them a direct message on Reddit. So I don't know this person, right? But I asked them if they would be willing to help me critique my work. And to my surprise, yes. So I shared with them version 2, and they were able to help give me some really thoughtful feedback. And they said I was pretty much a lot more on track, and it seemed like everything I said in terms of presenting my research and the things I did to understand what I was trying to do seemed like it was in the right direction. So I was really happy to hear that. I mean, I didn't want them to comment on what the end result was, but more if the direction made sense. It's important to validate and confirm the goal, right? If you're solving the right kind of problem, and they're more of an intermediate, higher level player, so they have more experience understanding some challenges beginners might have in terms of learning this game. So version 3 is a huge change from version 2 and 1. It's a huge jump. So here I finally add color. I thought it was about time. Color, in this case, I wanted color to make it feel like you're looking at a card that's her character. So she generally has 3 colors in terms of her concept. She has red, yellow, and blue, and those are the colors you'll find on the Philippine flag. And a lot of her clothes, they have a design from the jasmine flower, Philippine jasmine, and there's beautiful designs on her shirt and skirt. and I thought I wanted to incorporate that as well. So I did a lot of sketches when I was preparing this. So I drew a lot. I looked up her concept drawings and also looked up her images online, and I started trying to draw and understand color and understand some of the shapes associated with her character. You know, she has a ribbon on her hair. She has this sort of strap on sandals. This is a flower you'll see on her belt. She has a belt with a flower, the red, yellow, and there's also tones of brown, right? Her hair's a little dark brown, her sandals brown. So I started drawing these shapes to help me understand what I can incorporate. You know, here I had the 3 colors, and so this is my starting point here. So this is version 3. The first thing I wasn't very happy with was how much space startup frame was taking up. It was also very hard to read it because you have to go down and right. I didn't like how there's 2 dimensions to it because it's not very clear. You have to go like, okay, there's this many, but then you have to look at it this way. So intuitively, I thought I didn't like that. So I was trying to think, how can I decrease the space? How can I condense it more? And I was trying out different variations here, right? It didn't look really good, but I just kept playing with it. I think I was also trying to play with damage. So low, medium, high. I didn't like how the stars still looked very similar. It wasn't immediately visible or obvious that low, medium, high. It wasn't like, it didn't pop out at you. If you think about like the problem with this is, how would you call this? A square? A star with more spikes? Like, I don't think it's easy for you to name. If you can't really name it, you can't really understand it. I think that's a big part of data visualization. You know, a good example is color. So say if you have like a variation of purple, and if you're doing a presentation, you can say this purple color represents, and they had a different shade of purple, this lighter purple. And if you have 5 shades of purple, you're really like having a hard time describing purple. So I always believe you should know how to name something quickly so you can understand it better. I don't know the theory behind that, but that's just something I believe in terms of practice. So I was thinking, okay, maybe I should do size. How do you show more? Maybe you can play with size, right? Because here I played with numbers, I played with quantity. But here I was like, okay, let's play with size. So I used a circle, right? A smaller diameter meant low damage. If it was medium, it would be medium diameter, and large, and just, you know, looks like this. But still not. If this was alone, you can't really tell. Maybe, I don't know. Oh yeah, the other startup frame option I had was, okay, let's like have all of them laid out, but you color in the ones. So if it had 15, just color in 15 and leave the rest blank to show that here's the maximum. I know what I was doing, but I was just like, it didn't work out for me. Here was where it got interesting. I was like, okay, let's stop thinking about squares and rectangles. Maybe try circles. So I tried doing like these weird pie chart things, I guess. So I did like these pie chart things, and I was putting them in different direct orientation. I was putting them all over the place. I started coloring them. I was like, yeah, but this isn't, I don't know, it's kind of like weird if it's not filled in. It doesn't look right. And I started doing pie charts. Like, this is the chart that everyone loves to hate, right? But, you know, it didn't make, I don't know, it didn't feel right. Something about it felt off. And I was like, should I do a square and a pie chart? No. And then so I started looking at my sketches again, and the first thing I saw was that flower I drew. Can you see that? There's like a flower up here. So I started drawing this flower. I was looking at this flower in my notebook, and I saw also this little red flower too. And I thought, okay, there's something I can do here. So I thought flowers. So I mentioned earlier, so this flower is part of her character concept. We have, this is the character concept I just found online. It is provided by the Tekken team. And so she has these flowers, and I didn't know what they're called until I found this image. They're called supakita, so they're the Philippine jasmine, or also known as Arabian jasmine. And they look like this. And so I thought maybe I can draw that. So I started like drawing it out using the pen tool, and I copy and pasted it, and I reflected it, and I combined it. And then, you know, I I made this, and then I started like duplicating to look like a flower, and then I cut it and I got this shape, and I used this shape to build this. I initially had it very circular, but I think they look a little bit more pointy. It can be I think they are supposed to be circular, but they tend to curl in. But when I look at a lot of drawings people do of jasmine flowers, they're usually a little bit more pointed. So I had this, and I thought this looks really pretty, and it really showed her character. It showed who she was. I had a flower of 5 petals, which was 5 frames, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6. So maximum I counted in terms of startup frame for this data set was 30. So I had it like this. I was like, I'm very happy with this, because if it's a complete flower, that means it's 5. You can just do 5, 10, 15, and then you can sort of make out the rest, right? Even if it wasn't like filled in. So if it was like this, you can sort of count that really quickly as 3, right? It's not as awkward as like the missing piece from this one. This feels very awkward. It feels incomplete. But because there's this centerpiece holding it together, it didn't feel as awkward. So I like that. And then this was effective range, right? So how close range 1, range 2, range 3 to you have to be to the opponent. And so I decided to take this. I just drew one of her, I think, jewelry, her rings on her skirt. I just drew this, and then I thought, oh, this will be a nice embellishment, sort of. It just meant to, feel like her, right? It didn't really have much meaning, just meant to feel like it's Josie, it's her. Okay, so direction-wise, I was happy with startup frames, happy with effective range. I still had to explore damage. I wasn't very happy with that, so I did a lot of explore. Oh, here, let's explore color. Let's come back to that. Let's see. Here, okay, so here I explored more on the range. Yeah, I was doing a bunch of things like, oh, should I not do size but quantity again? Right, because you can do size, but you can do quantity. So 1 circle, 2 circle, 3 circle. It's just like, oh, 3 means high, 2 means mid, 1 means low. It seems very obvious. I was playing with the orientation, but still didn't feel like it hit the mark. So that's that. Let's look at color, because I'll come back to this. But I was still stuck on the circle, just size. I like the idea of quantity, and I just wanted to play with size. So I'm playing with color. So I made a palette of her. I just did an eyedropper, right? So you select it, hit I on keyboard, and you just do that, and then just take the color. So I did a couple of that. So I did her reds, I did her yellows, I did her browns. Here's a brown. I think this was from her skin. No, this is from her skin color and hair, I believe. And here was from her skirt, her blues. So her red, yellow, and blue represent the colors of the Filipino flag. So here's exploring color. I was trying, different variations. I really want to incorporate all 3 colors. They were pretty important to me. So I had this brown, I had the blue, but it didn't really look good. And this was by accident. I was copying and pasting it, and then I had like 2 flowers on top of each other. Like, oh, that looks cool, but I didn't go with it. I like how I did the yellow. So jasmine flowers are white, right? So let's like, okay, maybe just leave it white, and then in the middle just have a little bit of that yellow, just to add a little color. So I was like, okay, this is getting closer to what I want. I did this color, it was pretty bad. So I was kind of stuck in color, so I went back to the damage. I was like, okay, let's play with the color here. So I had gradients. It looks so horrible. It looks so bad. I was learning effects too. There's certain effects you can do within Illustrator, but none of them looked really good. I think this is like Gaussian blur. I might have said that wrong. Anyways, I was still playing with damage. I was just like, yeah, this is when I really like did that blur effect. It didn't look really good. And I continued to play with color. I kept experimenting with the blues, the browns, and the yellows. I really like this 3D color, but the 3D effect of this, but eventually I ditched it. But eventually what I did was I added a yellow circle behind it. I liked that because it was a more of an emphasis that this is a complete set. So this is 5 petals. You just count it as 1 unit. And I started experimenting with these bubbles because I think the reason was because she had a bubbly character. Another reason why I decided to use circles is because when a character in Tekken lands a hit like this, you'll see these circles around that place of impact. And so I took inspiration from these circles in the game. I might have made a note, but oh, so here maybe might be helpful. So can you see that sketch? Sort of. Here on top, I started drawing circles, and then eventually became a lot of circles. So it was like, okay, maybe I can do with quantity again, so not just size but quantity, and this is sort of both. So I said, okay, if it's low hit, it's a little bit of circles, small. If it's medium, it's medium-sized circles. It doesn't take up as much space, and if it's high, it kind of like bursts out, right? And so I really like this idea, and I just did random, orientation of the circles or the bubbles. So this is how it looks like when everything's cleaned up and everything's populated for version 3. And I really like the flowers. I thought they added such a nice touch to Josie as a character, and representing her home country as well. I was really happy with how this damage kind of looks like, because circle, and also if you look at the game, whenever you hit a punch, there's a bunch of circular visuals upon landing a hit that kind of comes and radiates out of that punch or kick, whatever it may be. And I really like that. So it was also important that it felt, so this kind of doing quantity and size. There's playing on both variables, and it's not meant to be, it's more of a bucket version, right? It's not very specific in terms of value, while a bar chart is very specific, right? This one isn't. It's just the numbers are there to help you quantify, but this is just tell you, oh, this is high damage, this is medium. It's trying to be more meaningful with the data, not just 20-point damage. Like, what does that really mean, right? You just want to know if it's going to be a lot of damage, a little bit of damage, or some damage. Now that this is done, let's see it in action. It's 1-2-2. It's a 3-hit combo move. It has a 10-frame startup, which is very fast, and all of its hits are high hits, so they hit the head area. If the opponent ducks, they can effectively dodge this move. This is down forward 4 into switch stance. Switch stance is something that's unique to Josie. When she enters the switch stance, she has her back facing the screen, and she can access more moves that are just for switch stance. So here we have switch stance 1. This is switch stance 2. Switch stance 3, and switch stance 4. So this was the project, and this is how it looked like at the end. I saw more room for improvement, but I was pretty happy with leaving it at this state. If I ever come back to it, what I would do is maybe explore other characters as well. The value of creating this card is mainly to have an able comparison. That's very important. Say if you're able to pick a move from Josie and you can compare it with another character to maybe learn the mechanics of another character. If you just want to pick up a new one, maybe see where similarities, what makes a character different or unique. Just some final thoughts on this project. I did a lot of projects where I was expressing ideas. It was really driven to explore, understand who I was, build awareness of my skills and what I'm good at, and most importantly, what I like. What were some of the things I gravitate towards? And I really wanted to make something that would be useful to other people. A lot of times, the things we make in data visualization world, in this field, is things usually get looked at once or twice, and it's kind of forgotten about. And I didn't quite like that aspect. Maybe I really want to do something a little bit different, where it's not something that you just look at and move on, but something you reference. You know, like a poster you put up in your room, or how scientists look at, the periodic table. They continually reference it to learn new things, to understand context, to understand what they're doing. And I think that's important. And the periodic table is really good at showing a lot of the how. Like, why do certain elements have certain properties? And that table explains it really eloquently. I've never intentionally always wanted to work with cards, but this project made me discover it. I've made a couple projects where I used cards before, and it's just something I gravitated towards because I like how it just breaks down information in a way that it's not showing everything, and it allows you to control what you see. You can decide what information you want to take in and slowly absorb it instead of having to take it in all at once. I think this is one of the challenges of working or using large charts. Usually everything's revealed at once, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I think it determines on what kind of context you want to use that for. And I thought cards was a good way to explore that aspect. I think of cards as almost like an evolution of what a book is. I've always wanted to keep designing books. When it comes to data visualization, I didn't like creating a poster. I didn't like that idea of creating one thing. I want to create a thing that told story over time, and it was something that would be long form. It wasn't something that would just be short lived. And cards are sort of an evolution of that, I think, because I see one card as a page, but it's not like a book where it's bound in a specific order. I think cards have potential where you can move them around. You could change the direction of the story. It's not linear, it's not predetermined. You decide as an end user how you want to keep the cards flowing, how you want to read the data, how you want to make sense of it. And you can decide what you get from it. And I think cards is going to be something I'm going to keep exploring because there's something there. It's at this intersection of something that's print work, static, it's smaller data sets, and all of these things are things that I'm good at, and they're things that I excel at and I enjoy doing. And I think finding this particular way of expressing data visualization is very exciting to me, and it keeps me interested and engaged. I hope you enjoyed this video and this project, and I'll see you in the next one. That was way too long.